Maybe we'll get like 30 new people who exactly want to watch this kind of video on this video, and they'll be like, "Well, shoot, I'll go back and watch all of them and figure it out for them."
It'll be like chapter 45 of Pride and Prejudice. And that is the kind of content I was looking for.
Yeah, that's the one. I want to hear people talking about chapter 45 of Pride and Prejudice.
All right, well, let's get started then.
Chapter 45 was a bit one of the kind of slower chapters.
I mean, I was looking at it, I'm like, I'm not sure this is a chapter that has enough to justify an entire session.
Right.
But I highlighted a lot. And
I highlighted a lot in the end, mostly because I read that like 10 minutes ago.
Well,
and I was like awake enough to be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of that's a relevant part of the chapter, a thing that was said or whatever.
So first thing I highlighted was recognizing, like, she's pretty sure that Bingley's sister disliked her because she was jealous of Darcy's attention. And now that Darcy has proposed and they're like really clearly he definitely likes Elizabeth, she's like, I bet Miss Bingley is not happy to see me. And what I highlighted was she was curious to know with how much civility on that lady's side the acquaintance would now be renewed.
Yeah.
Like, she's not nervous about it. She's just like, idly curious. Given that she really hates me and doesn't want me to be here, I wonder how she'll act. And I just thought it was so Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, that was definitely very Elizabeth. Because like, I don't think Elizabeth really ever cared about Miss Bingley. She was sort of like, I don't really like her. She's kind of shallow. And even like when Jane was like, oh my gosh, Mr. Bingley's sisters are so great, Elizabeth was like, I don't know. I mean, he's cool. I get it. He's cool, but she's those sisters they're a little bad news bears.
They are. And she's like, I'm not going to argue with you, Jane. I'm glad you enjoy them. I'm glad you're happy. But yeah, no. And the next thing I highlighted was the next paragraph where they were shown through the hall into the saloon, which is a word that, now means Wild West bar.
Right. But it was just a different way to say the salon, wasn't it? Like, which was like just a meeting room.
Yep. And so I'm trying to see, saloons, page 135 to 136. By Bill Bryson. If you don't have it, you should get it.
I have it on audiobook. I listened to it on audiobook, which is how I remembered that it was there, but it's hard to rifle through an audiobook and look for references.
A particular thing. All right. For a time in the 17th and 18th century, so drawing room is a shortening for withdrawing room, which was a place to go away from everybody. Drawing room was challenged in more refined circles by the French salon, which was sometimes anglicized to saloon, but both those words gradually became associated with spaces outside the home, so that saloon came first to signify a room for socializing in a hotel or on a ship, and then a place for dedicated drinking, and finally, a little unexpectedly, a type of automobile. Salon, meanwhile, became indelibly attached to places associated with artistic endeavors before being appropriated from about 1910 by providers of hair care and beauty treatments.
Yeah, that's I love etymology. Although I do have to say, so the word, the tree that you looked up for me from that book,
yes,
not so extinct as he makes it out in the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like there's it's not on the list of like extinct trees or anything. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and they're like, yes, it is it's an endangered species of tree. But it's like native to Florida and Central America or something. And in fact, it was Wikipedia suggests that it was used to breed the other types of mahogany that we generally use today, which are more they're lower quality mahogany, but they grow faster and bigger.
Sure. Okay, so it's possible that we could have that quality of mahogany again.
Yes, it just be would even more expensive because you have to wait to grow it because apparently it grows really long, really like it takes a really long time to grow.
But I mean, that's probably part of like because of that, it's denser and it's
Yeah.
harder. That's what made it so fantastic.
And I think the Wikipedia article said that it's also called West Indian mahogany or West
Okay, yeah,
India
sure.
mahogany.
Because Columbus thought he was in the West Indies.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Sweetania mahogany, commonly known as the West Indian mahogany, is a species of Sweetania native to southern Florida in the United States and islands in the Caribbean, including the Bahamas, Cuba, Jamaica, and Hispaniola. It is the species from which the original mahogany wood was produced. It is listed as threatened in the Preservation of Native Flora of Florida Act. Its blossom is the national tree of the Dominican Republic.
Huh. There you go.
Well, so now I'm tempted to like take every bit of like crazy sounding history that Bill Bryson writes in one of his books with a huge grain of salt
and go double check it. Well, let's check Adam online.
Yeah, saloon. It says anglicized form of salon and originally used interchangeable with it, meaning large hall in a public place for entertainment, etc. from 1747, especially a passenger boat from 1817, and also used of railway cars furnished like drawing rooms. Sense of public bar developed by 1841 American English.
Oh, and just means hall. Salon. So there you go. All right. Anyway,
but hall we know from Bill Bryson meant like the main place where you like greeted people.
Right, and you still see it in places where you've got it used to be the entire building.
Yeah.
Right, and you still see that in places like Salisbury Hall or Toad Hall or whatever, City Hall.
Right.
It's not a hallway.
Right. That's an interesting bit of etymology.
Yeah. Houses are fascinating. So I highlighted Miss Darcy looked as if she wished for courage enough to join the conversation, and sometimes did venture a short sentence when there was least danger of its being heard.
Oh, I know. I felt so sad when I read that. Because I'm like, oh, I've been there. I was there when I was little.
I was picturing like NNO, and like, I mean, we've all been there,
yeah.
Right? But some of us are more painfully shy than others. And but we've definitely all been like, yeah, I'll say something as long as no one will hear me. I also thought it was a perfect characterization of Miss Darcy.
Yeah. And then just like the whole thing of like Miss Bingley was, I just like hate her right now.
I know.
Like I really just can't stand her.
Yeah.
Like she's not even like doing a good job of like proper British veiling her insults. She's like just very direct and blunt about stuff.
Yeah. So when my cousin posted on Facebook, she's like, is there like the opposite of a backhanded compliment, right? It sounds like a compliment, but it's actually an insult. Is there something that like sounds like an insult, but is actually is there a word for that? Because Jane Austen does this so marvelously. And Miss Bingley doesn't do either well. She's just like,
yeah.
So yeah, I highlighted especially because she's got this whole paragraph talking about like everything that's wrong with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
To Mr. Darcy. Persuaded as Miss Bingley was that Darcy admired Elizabeth, this was not the best method of recommending herself. But angry people are not always wise.
Yeah,
I feel like you could pull that out on your wall. like just on a plaque. Angry people are not always wise.
Yeah.
But like in her long rant, I highlighted there is a self-sufficiency without fashion which is intolerable.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, really? Like
That's an insult?
that is right? It, like not only I don't like it, but intolerable.
Mm-hmm. I highlighted earlier than that they were when they were talking and meeting, they brought in
Mm-hmm.
I just highlighted this because it weirded me out. It said cold meat, cake, and a variety of fruit. And I'm like, okay, cake and fruit, that's fine. I get that.
I
Cold meat on a tray with cake and fruit. That seems odd.
mean, and I wonder there's a there's a cookbook I have that claims that what Marie Antoinette said was not let them eat cake, but let them eat brioche, which is a kind of rich kind of bread. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a little bit, it's like halfway between bread and cake, but you could totally make a sandwich out of brioche.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could totally like put fresh peaches on top of it and call it dessert. It could go either way. Um, but you know, the translation from English to French, whatever, isn't always. And I wonder if what they brought out was more like brioche, and you could make a sandwich with that and the cold meat, or you could do.
Okay. I could see that. I could see that. I was just like, because like when someone says cake, I think of like a big old birthday cake with like two or three layers of cake inside and like frosting and maybe like strawberries or whatever designs. Happy birthday! Thanks for coming to my party
Right.
written on it.
Right. Or maybe it was just weird. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe it wasn't weird back then. I don't know, but oh, and then I like how much time Elizabeth spent trying to decide whether or not she wanted Mr. Darcy there or definitely wanted him to not show up.
And whether she wished or feared it most, she could scarcely determine.
Right.
So I highlighted that. I highlighted, when he finally does show up, Elizabeth wisely resolved to be perfectly easy and unembarrassed. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, let me know that works out for you.
Yeah. Well, and then Elizabeth had a fair opportunity of deciding whether she most feared or wished for the appearance of Miss Darcy by the feelings which prevailed on his entering the room. It's like, well, that answers
I,
that question.
except it totally doesn't. Like she says, it has a fair opportunity and then instantly contradicts herself. Uh, and then, though but a moment before she believed her wishes to predominate, she began to regret that he came.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I don't know if I want him to show up or I want him not to show up. And then he shows up and she's like, I don't know if I'm glad that he showed up or I wish he had never shown up. Like,
I think the way I
nothing
read
changed.
that one, she was like, you know what, I kind of wish he'd show up. I think that would be cool. And then he showed up, and she's like, oh gosh, I was wrong. Oh geez, he should not be
I was
here.
wrong. That is a good point. I
So like,
anyway, I was reading through it and I think it's like I feel like it's a very honest examination of how it feels in that early phase of a relationship when you're like, are we a thing? Are we not a thing? I don't know. Do I like you? I mean, I like you, but do I like you? And rather than shortcut these cliches into straight into the butterfly feelings and the dewdrops and whatever, Jane Austen is like, no, really, this is step by step exactly how it feels.
mm-hmm. No, and it's really, really accurate. Like just the way that she's like she's she like modern authors I think would be like she kept on thinking about him or focusing on him, and Jane Austen is like, well, what's she thinking about him, and just saying that instead.
Yeah, and I really appreciate her doing that and treating it as a subject.
See.
But yeah, there's a country song that's probably an early Taylor Swift, but the chorus involves, I want to hold you close, I want to push you away, I want to make you go, I want to make you stay. I'm like, that's what it's like.
Yeah. Uh,
There's things I did
oh
not
gosh.
understand at all.
Oh gosh. And then Miss Bingley brings up the militia. Oh man, like she could not have done a worse job of endearing herself to Mr. Darcy. Like not that she could have won him over, but she
Because
just
he's so freaking stupid and shallow. Like, he has no interest.
hmm But she
But I
couldn't
do,
have done a worse job, I think, of making herself more endeared to him.
right?
It's like, here,
Well,
let's
and
talk
she
about
says,
this. Go ahead.
the very circumstance which had been designed to turn his thoughts from Elizabeth seemed to have fixed them on her more and more cheerfully.
Yeah. Yep, I
Well,
highlighted that too.
because Miss Bingley gave her a chance to like to demonstrate loyalty, right? She brings it up, and Elizabeth, I mean, Elizabeth is characterized by her wit and her sarcasm and her like just her withering replies. And Miss Bingley has just like opened herself up for this with the information that Elizabeth has. And Darcy is just sitting here like, oh my God, please don't, please don't. And Elizabeth just like smiles and says nothing. And like you can just picture Darcy like, are we okay? Oh my God, thank you. And so
Yeah.
now he is grateful to Elizabeth, which tends to be a bonding experience, which was like as opposite as you could get from what Miss Bingley intended.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was
It would
very
be an
much.
interesting analysis, actually, to go through and determine to what extent is Miss Bingley responsible for Elizabeth and Darcy getting together?
like without trying to, or like rather ironically.
Not to, yep. But like early on, she spent the whole time like talking about Elizabeth to try to get Darcy to insult her. And Darcy just kept like, but with his, honesty, he would be like, she'd be like, Elizabeth has, ugly teeth. And Darcy would be like, no, I think she has okay teeth. And she'd be like, Elizabeth has an ugly dress. And she'd be like, yeah, I don't care much about dresses. She'd be like, Elizabeth doesn't have very attractive eyes. And he'd be like, no, I have to disagree with you there. And by the time their stay at Netherfield had finished, Mr. Darcy had exhaustively cataloged every feature of Elizabeth and whether or not he liked it.
Yeah. And whether or not, and like to what extent he was okay with it. So he knew. Like there wasn't even like a surprise of like, oh gosh, actually she's got kind of weird teeth. It was like, no, I already know.
I'm okay with the teeth. She's too independent. No, I kind of like that about her. She
hmm
talks too much about books. No, that's definitely a plus.
Yeah, yeah. uh, yeah, no, it's just like, oh, how very ill Miss Elizabeth Bennet looks this morning.
And she just keeps at it.
Yeah, he coolly replying
Just
that he
keep.
perceived no other alteration than her being rather tanned, no miraculous consequence of traveling in the summer.
And then she starts listing like all of the problems. Like, oh, her face is too thin, her features are not handsome, her nose wants character. And I'm like, what are you even?
Yeah, what does that even mean? Her nose wants character. What the heck is a nose with character? I don't know what. That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, let's see, this would be 1800 to be determined. Around the same time in America, Louisa May Alcott was writing a character who was sad because her nose was kind of like cute and buttonish, and she really wanted a like fine Grecian, like patrician nose, and she was very sad that she just had an adorable little nose instead. So I guess maybe, I don't even know.
Maybe, yeah. That's weird. I like this part then, like after Miss Bingley has basically thoroughly embarrassed herself and Mr. Darcy has generally disagreed with her entirely on everything. He then went away and Miss Bingley was left to all the satisfaction of having forced him to say what gave no one any pain but herself.
That I love that line. That's just fabulous.
Like it's
Like,
really sarcastic. It's really sarcastic, but at the same time, I feel like when you're that kind of angry and jealous, that there sort of is a bit of a self-satisfaction of like getting someone to say something that could be expected to make you feel the way that you feel already.
There's a psychologist talks about the title of the book is Games People Play, and one of the games he lists is what he calls the stamp collection game, right? Like in grocery stores or Subway used to do this thing where you got, if you get 10 stamps, then you get a free foot long.
Yeah.
And basically they've set up this psychological reward for themselves where if you contain your anger 10 times, then you get a free irrational blow up on a subject of your choice. Like, that's how they have set up their lives, which means that they are looking for reasons to get upset so that they can generously forgive so that they can get a stamp. And I feel like Miss Bingley is kind of playing one of those games. And on the one hand, she's caused no one pain but herself, but she got the stamp.
Right. Well, now and now she can feel justified about being angry with Mr. Darcy because he actually said something that would make her upset. Because before
Did you see her
done anything, he was being nothing but polite to her, and she was upset, and so she had to force him.
Right. And then he leaves, right? And then he went away, and she turns to her sister and just like, "Can you believe he said that to me?"
Yeah.
And then Mrs. Gardner and Elizabeth very carefully not talking about Mr. Darcy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just the end. It's the very last. Elizabeth was longing to know what Mrs. Gardner thought of him, and Mrs. Gardner would have been highly gratified by her niece's beginning the subject. So they didn't talk about him at all, even though both of them wanted to.
But I also really loved, so the paragraph is about not talking around the subject that they want to, but never directly addressing it. And in the entire paragraph about not mentioning Mr. Darcy, she never mentions Mr. Darcy. The paragraph is written around the subject.
Which one is that?
The very last paragraph of the chapter. Mrs. Gardner and Elizabeth talked of all that had occurred during their visit as they returned, except what particularly interested them both. But she doesn't say what that is. The look and behavior of everybody they had seen were discussed, except of the person who had mostly engaged their attention. But they don't say who that is.
Yeah.
They talked of his sister, friends, his house, his fruit, of everything but himself. Yet Elizabeth was longing to know what Mrs. Gardner thought of him, and Mrs. Gardner would have been highly gratified by her niece's beginning the subject. And I just love that the paragraph is written in a way that it doesn't directly address the subject that they're not directly addressing.
That is fantastic. Like that's like a kind of literary brilliance right there.
Right?
As she's saying that they're talking around the subject, she is talking around the subject to like help you I feel like that helps draw you in.
Yep.
That is
like they're talking around the subject just like this. The other thing I noticed is the very first chapter, or the very first paragraph of the chapter, is convinced as Elizabeth now was that Miss Bingley's dislike of her had originated in jealousy, she could not help feeling how unwelcome her appearance at Pemberley must be to her, and was curious to know with how much civility on that lady's side the acquaintance would now be renewed. And I feel like that was just almost a shout out, like a signpost from Jane Austen, like, heads up, this chapter is going to be about Miss Bingley being rude to Elizabeth.
Yeah. No,
and I kind of want to go
sets it up.
All the other chapters and see if that is true. Like, how many chapters has she done that for?
Right. Well, let's see let's look at chapter 46 and we'll see what's the first paragraph. Elizabeth had been a good deal disappointed in not finding a letter from Jane on their first arrival at Lambton, and this disappointment had been renewed on each of the mornings that had now been spent there, but on the third her repining was over, and her sister justified by the receipt of 2 letters from her at once, on one of which was marked that it had been missent elsewhere. Elizabeth was not surprised at it, as Jane had written the direction remarkably ill. So this is probably a chapter about the letters that she receives from Jane.
And I bet it is. I mean, just knowing what's coming up.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Let's see.
Now I'm going to be watching for that.
Right? Elizabeth had settled it that Mr. Darcy would bring his sister to visit her the very next day after her reaching Pemberley, and was consequently resolved not to be out of sight of the inn for the whole of that morning. So you would think this chapter would be about Mr. Darcy and Miss Darcy coming to visit them at the inn.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. So yeah, I bet she's been doing that this whole time.
I can't believe that we only just now noticed that.
I know, right?
Well, and like if you go all the way back to chapter 1, the infamous like starting sentence of the book.
Universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
Like that sets up not only the chapter, in which like her crazy mother justifies this.
Yes. But also the entire book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's.
Yeah. So I'm looking at chapter 43.
Uh-huh.
Elizabeth, as they drove along, watched for the first appearance of Pemberley Woods with some perturbation, and when at length they turned in at the lodge, her spirits were in a high flutter. This chapter is going to be about Elizabeth being really uncomfortable at Pemberley.
Oh man.
So yeah, we gotta watch out for that. I feel like we may get to the end of this and be like, okay, wait, we got to go back to the beginning and read it all over again.
Right. Which it solves the problem of what do we do after we're finished with Pride and Prejudice.
That's true.
We read it again.
That's true. It saves us from having to read Moby Dick.
Yes, which I'm not necessarily against saving us from having to read Moby Dick. It's a bit of a step up lengthwise from.
It really is.
Pride and Prejudice, and I'm already having enough problems with Pride and Prejudice, considering that I only just finished chapter 45 this morning.
We could. Well, I forgot to remind you on Tuesday though, so that's partly my fault.
Yeah, but I'd been doing okay on my own even without the reminders. But this week I just had a lot of stuff that I was working on, so.
And next week I'm going to be on Vale Pass.
Okay.
At this point in the week, so you'll have 2 weeks to do the next batch.
Okay, cool. Whenever we have 2 weeks, I'm always like, okay, I need to not read too much because I could see that being a thing. Like I just like take 2 weeks. It happens to be the 2 weeks that I'm just like, yeah, I'll just read like a couple chapters a day, and then I finish the book, and then we have to talk about the whole rest of the book in one.
Right. Well, I mean, that wouldn't be the end of the world, but
No, it would
we
just.
could go other direction for length and read Jekyll and Hyde next.
I've read Jekyll and Hyde, so yeah, that would be fun to go and revisit that one.
It would be, yeah.
When
it was an
when I was going to commuting to school on the bus, and I was taking and it was like 2 hours each way. Like one school year, I just read like all of the Gothic classics except for the Portrait of Dorian Gray, because I started that one and I just couldn't finish it. It was just so boring.
I woke up in the middle of the night on Wednesday night, like 2 a.m, with a nightmare related to the Picture of Dorian Gray. And I couldn't get it out of my head. I've never read it. Like, I know the kind of premise, but I've never read it. And I'm like, I'm going to have to read this to get it, just to expunge it. And I was like, all right, we're going to try the hot tea and yoga approach. And if that doesn't work, I'm going on Project Gutenberg at 3 a.m. to download this book so that I can just like stay up and read it straight through. But fortunately the yoga worked. So
Oh, good. Yeah, like I read through. I don't even know how far I was through the book. I feel like I was making a fair amount, like I'd read through a fair amount of it, and I was like, "There's no.
nothing is happening.
This is just like some picture about a douchebag, or a movie or a book about a douchebag. Like it's just like he's just sort of like a dumb guy who doesn't do anything."
I mean, and that was the point. But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could, because I've never read Frankenstein.
Also a very good one. That one I really Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula I really enjoyed. There aren't actually that many Gothic horror books.
Right. And I have about the like emotional resiliency of an 8-year-old. So PG-13 is probably okay. I really can't do R. Mm-hmm. It's why I haven't seen Deadpool yet.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I'll be up to Dracula.
Dracula is like, I mean, it's it's in the Gothic horror group, so like the writing is very much like kind of like the the same sort of writing that we have in, well, not that book, but in Pride and Prejudice. Like it's the same kind of like sort of detached, like matter of fact speaking, but the stuff that gets described in it is actually like pretty dark. Like some guy going crazy at an insane asylum and like eating bugs, and like Dracula like very slowly like seducing and like this woman and like her friends and family like trying to take care of her and like doing emergency blood transfusions because she's like has no blood left to her in the morning, but they're trying to keep her from like converting into a vampire, and like they have no idea what's going on, sort of a thing. So like there are some things that are like really involved actually, but
because like even in Buffy, where Angel is describing when he drove Drusilla mad and then converted her, like that plot line was a little squicky for me. So yeah, I probably can't do Dracula, but we could try Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein's actually pretty okay, I think. It's nothing, I think it's nothing at all like what Hollywood wants us to think it is.
Right. I like the Tumblr post about intelligence is knowing that Frankenstein isn't the monster. Yeah. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster.
Yeah.
And so, that's a different kind of theme.
Yeah.
So But yeah, we've still got a third of this book left before we got to decide anything. So
Cool. All right.
uh,
Well,
so
2 weeks then.
yeah. Um, and 2 weeks is NNO. So if we can do it at 6 o'clock our time, which is now 9 o'clock
9.
your time,
Yep.
that would be good.
Okay.
Just because people are going to start showing up at like 6:30 or 7.
Yeah. Well, and
Depending.
if I can do 5:30 your time if I had remembered that was an hour earlier
I
for me.
totally, it just occurred to me, like literally as I'm like, I'm almost ready. And then I'm like, I just remember daylight savings. Is that a thing that I
Yeah.
should have thought of here?
Yeah. No, so
I would,
the yeah, I woke up at like 7:30 and then I was like, it's Saturday. I don't have to be up until like 9. So like I went back to bed and
right?
then 8:30 I woke up and I'm like, "Oh, Amanda responded to my thing. That's cool." And so I was, doing that and then
Oh,
you messaged me and you were like, "Hey, I'm ready." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, daylight
yeah.
savings."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, if we can do 6 Mountain Daylight, that would be great.
Okay. That sounds good. So 9 o'clock for me then. Sweet.
Yeah. Cool. We'll see you then.
All right. See you
Happy
later.
Easter.
Bye.